How's it going, everybody? Thank you very much. I'm Orlando Ruiz Jr., and welcome to another classic movie review. I am a big fan of action films. Ever since I was a little kid growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, there was no way of escaping the Mount Rushmore of action stars: Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Steven Seagal. To me, Steven Seagal was always the biggest badass of the four icons, even though, for the most part, the majority of his films weren't all that great. He had a couple of real good ones in there, but especially some of those early ones. But even in the early ones, there were some that were entertaining, not great, but still entertaining. And that is what I think this movie falls under: 1990s Hard to Kill, from director Bruce Malmuth. Steven Seagal's character is a cop by the name of Mason Storm, one of the most badass movie names, by the way. And Mason gets some video footage of a shady deal that happens at a dock of this dirty politician on the come up. And he escapes the docks unharmed, but they catch up with him at his home when he's with his wife and son. And so the bad guys send over this hit squad to take them out, and for the most part, they're successful. But Seagal is left in a coma, and after 7 years, he wakes up, and then he comes back for revenge, and that's the overall plot of the movie. Before I delve into some negative things about this movie, I want to go into some positive things first. And one of the first positive things I can say about this movie is there's some pretty good music throughout from David Michael Frank, the composer. I really like the guitar riff that is like the main theme of the Mason Storm character that we hear when we see his character come on screen for the first time. And every now and then throughout the movie, we hear it a little. And it's one of the fun parts of the movie for sure. The action scenes are entertaining, even though sometimes they are kind of a mixed bag because they do come with a bit of a flaw every now and then, depending on the scene. There's one scene in particular that comes to mind when Seagal is beating up on some bad guys, and there's a bad guy that's waiting for his turn, standing right behind Seagal, as Seagal is having his back turned to this guy, and the guy can very clearly start chopping away with this large cleaver he has on his hand. But no, he stands there behind Seagal, holding the cleaver like this, having his arm cocked, like, what are you waiting for, man? Heck at him. Let's see what he does. But no, he has to stand there, wait his turn so that Seagal can finish up and turn around and get to him and beat his ass. Things like that do bother me, and that happens quite a bit in the fight scenes. Another thing I liked about the movie is the end scene with Seagal walking around this bad guy's house saying, "Oh, Vernon, oh, Vernon," and he's looking from room to room and checking closets, and the bad guy is hiding somewhere, and he's walking around basically as the bad guy is playing hide and seek, and he's just calling out to him, "Oh, Vernon." And watching that scene, I remember feeling like this giddiness because you're already on board with Seagal's character after all he's been through. So watching him go around the house and whipping everybody's ass and making his way to the main bad guy, you're just excited to see that main bad guy get his. Alright, now to get into the juicy stuff, the negative things I had to say about Hard to Kill. First one being, there is a scene very early on in the film where Seagal's character is talking to another cop at the station, calling from a payphone, and there's a bad guy cop that picks up his phone at his desk, and all of a sudden he can hear their conversation. I'm sure back when people watched this back in the day, they must have thought, oh, it's like when I'm at home and somebody in the other room upstairs can pick up the line and hear me on the phone talking to somebody. But this is a police station. They're supposed to have their own lines. You can't just pick up a phone at your desk and hear somebody else's conversation like that. It's not like a house, like a residence. If the corrupt cop bad guys had tapped the phone, that'd be one thing, but they never established that. They never say that. They never hint at that. The guy just picks up his desk phone and he can hear another phone line, another cop's conversation. I'm pretty sure their phone lines would be a little more secure than that, even back in 1990. Very early in the film, there is a scene where Seagal's character goes into a liquor store and he's having a fun dialogue with the owner of the liquor store, and then some guys come in to rob the place, to kill the owner, and then Seagal has to whip some ass. But when you watch this scene and you see everybody getting their ass whipped, you notice that they're falling on mats because there's mats all over the floor of this liquor store. Why are there mats in this store for this one scene? I'll tell you why. So that the bad guys have a soft place to fall. Was there a spill all over that area of the store? I mean, I don't know. It's something that does bother me when I rewatch that moment. And the fighting in that scene is so kick-ass that it's hard not to kind of forgive it, but I have to admit, it does bother me when I watch the movie. Something else I got to bring up is in the scene in the liquor store where Seagal is having a little chit chat with the liquor store owner. They're talking about the Oscars because I guess they are on this night, and so Seagal is like, "Why aren't you watching the Oscars?" And the guy is like, "The Oscars?" He's like, "Yeah, the Oscars." He's like, "I hate the Oscars." And that goes on for about a minute, and then the fight takes place between the bad guys that come in to rob the place, and then after that, it cuts away to the cops outside after everything has gone down. And then again, it picks up again with the same subject with some really bad ADR. You hear some really bad audio dubbing of some guy who is with his back to the camera, with Seagal facing the camera, who Seagal is talking to, and you hear this guy say, "It looks like you won the Oscar tonight, Storm." What is with all this shit about the Oscars? In that one scene from the time that Seagal's character walks into the store, has that little conversation, and then when that scene is over and it cuts to the next scene, we must hear the word Oscars about a half dozen times. It's like they were trying to put it out there that they wanted some consideration. I don't know if they thought that Seagal's performance was Oscar worthy. Fuck no, it's not. But yeah, they were really trying to beat it into the audience's head. This movie, Oscar, this movie goes together. No, they don't. I gotta mention the love interest in this movie, Kelly LeBrock, who plays the role of Andrea, the nurse in the film that nurses Seagal's character back to health. It's kind of like that Florence Nightingale thing. She falls in love with her coma patient, but it feels like a very one-sided romance. Yeah, the little bit of romance they tried to throw into this movie just doesn't work for me, especially since it feels very one-sided. And you can't get any more one-sided than this scene at the very end when her character tells Seagal's character, "I love you, Storm," and he doesn't say jack shit. Just alright, I want to talk about the main villain of the film, Senator Vernon Trent, played by character actor William Sadler, who was an actor that we saw quite often back in the day. He was in Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. The same year that this movie came out, he also played the main villain in Die Hard 2. Much more of a badass villain in that film as opposed to the villain he played in this one. He also popped up in The Shawshank Redemption. He was in Iron Man 3. They really tried to give this character a catchphrase in this movie that I think they were really hoping would catch on. Like back in '87 when RoboCop came out, there was that catchphrase from that movie that everybody was saying back then. "I'll buy that for $1." And didn't quite work out with Hard to Kill because this movie has something similar with the bad guy always spouting out to people, "You can take that to the bank." And he has this commercial that pops up where he says that in his little ad campaign commercial. There is a montage where Seagal's character is in that coma, and that's all you hear. You see little flashes of clippings of the politician's progress going from assemblyman to a senator, constantly hearing it over and over again. "You can take that to the bank. You can take that to the bank." They were really trying to beat us over the head with that saying, and I think they were hoping that that would catch on. It's especially funny in a moment where Seagal's character sees an ad of one of those campaign commercials for Senator Trent, and he uses that phrase at the end of the ad, and it kind of triggers a memory. Seagal's character later on is sitting down at a bed facing the camera, and he says the exact same thing, right? Not quite into the camera, but kind of facing the camera. And it is so damn cheesy. "I'm gonna take you to the bank, Senator Trent. To the blood bank. Dun 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 dun." Given that Seagal is publicly known as being kind of a douche in real life, I don't really try to think about a lot of the real life stuff about certain actors because when it comes to their movies, I just try to focus on their movies. And I did get to see him in person once when I was a kid when he came to the Capitol here in California. My mom took me to the Capitol and there was a huge crowd and she got his autograph for me, and I remember he was towering over her because my mom is this little shorty of a woman and I was a little kid at the time, shorter than her. And so I remember looking up at the guy thinking, wow, this guy is tall. It was before he put on a bunch of weight and everything, and he was in his prime, and I was such a huge fan of his movies. And so I still wish to this day I kept onto that piece of paper with his autograph, because he's always going to be one of the action heavyweights of, the 80s and 90s. Whenever I think about the Steven Seagal action movies that are actually legit good, I usually think about Under Siege 2, The Glimmer Man, Marked for Death, which came out the same year as this, his first film, Above the Law, which is my personal favorite, and Out for Justice, which is a classic as well. For me, this is a two-star kind of action movie. I get some enjoyment out of it, but for the most part, yeah, it's one of those lesser tier Seagal films, in my opinion. If you are into Steven Seagal's movies, if you're an action movie fan, if you're a fan of martial arts movies, I do recommend that you give this a watch just for the action scenes. This is definitely a movie you can find on streaming. I've come across it on HBO Max every now and then with some of his other action classics from that era. And this is my copy of the DVD, because I'm going to have a DVD of this baby. I used to have the VHS back in the day, but yeah, don't know where that is. But this is the only thing that has survived from the DVD era of the late 90s, early 2000s. As you can see here, it's one of the old school DVDs that has this little plastic little clip flap thing on the side. And yeah, Hard to Kill, 1990. Seagal and his then wife there, Kelly LeBrock. And yeah, classic old school cover. Thank you all very much for watching this classic movie review. I always appreciate it. If you're into this kind of thing, if you're into the classics, if you're into movies in general, hit the bell, subscribe. Please don't forget to comment, share, like, and please don't forget to look out for the next classic movie review. Those of you that keep supporting the channel, thank you very much for coming back. I always appreciate it. Everybody take care of each other. Till next time, peace out. God bless.